Rebecca had got up early. She was nervous, and she hadn't been able to sleep last night, not a wink. Now she was regretting it. She felt light-headed, and the trip on the underground wasn't helpful. Of course, she hadn't got a seat, even that early. She had clung to the handrail and hoped for the best, like she always did, but today was different. Where she felt nervous, everyone around her just looked bored. Those sitting were staring into space, or trying to avoid meeting anyone else's gaze. Some were reading, some were doing puzzles. Becca couldn't help staring at a woman who was putting her lipstick and makeup on. She marvelled at her as she pulled out the mascara and finished off her immaculately shadowed eyes. She had enough trouble doing it in the safety of her bathroom. The train got more and more packed as she neared central London, and soon she was beginning to feel the pressure of people around her. She couldn't help thinking about things she really didn't want to think about. Eventually those thoughts went back to Jack. She tried to push the thoughts away, but they wouldn't go. Why him? He was so young. He had his life ahead of him. He had been a good friend. They had spent lots of time together when he first moved away from home. Him and that computer program. She smiled when she thought about it, and how she joked with him often that some people got a dog. He got a computer program which he couldn't take for walks. She was dragged from her thoughts by a woman next to her, who lost her balance while trying to get something out of her handbag and stumbled into her. She in turn managed to overbalance a well-dressed city gent, who up until that point had managed to successfully hold the handrail, hold his briefcase, and read a newspaper. He got his footing again, but he neatly folded the newspaper, put it into his briefcase, and joined the others staring blankly into space. The posters on the stations were obscured by crowds of people, but Rebecca amused herself for a short while by reading the posters inside the train above the system map. There was a short poem about cats ruling the world, and the usual adverts for beauty products. She reached into her pocket and got out the email she had received about the invitation to a job interview. She carefully folded it and read it again, just to check she had the right day and time. It had been out of the blue and quite a surprise. Apparently, Jack had recommended her shortly before his death. She ran through the list of documents she had been asked to bring. She then folded it and put it away, and took a deep breath. Her stop was the next one. She pushed away along the narrow gap between the lines of legs of those who had seats, and around the people who clung like neatly dressed monkeys to the rails along the roof. She always smiled as she wondered if that was the educational purpose of the bars in the playground, to get children ready for the feat of balance necessary later in life. She stepped down just before the doors closed, and she was carried along with the crowd down the tiled corridors and up the escalator. She reached into her pocket for her ticket and slipped it into the slot in the silver machine. The barricades flapped back with an resounding thudding sound, and her way was clear to make her escape from the labyrinth of tunnels and stairs. She didn't stop. She kept walking and followed the crowd towards the daylight above. Once outside, she was mesmerized by the number of people who were walking with purpose. It always amused her. The road sweeper was making his way along with a large cart, sweeping and using his hand grabber to pick up bits he couldn't sweep. In front of him there was a little debris. Behind him the pavement and gutter was neat and tidy. She pulled her trusty map out of her pocket. She had marked the way on it before she had set out. She hoped that she would be able to recognise it now that she was here. She had opted for Embankment Station, as she had hoped it would be less busy than Charing Cross, but whether she was right or not was hard to tell. There were plenty of people around, but she wasn't going to ask, even if she was lost. She stopped for a moment to look at the flower stall by the exit and to get her bearings. There was a road to her left, but she needed to go straight up towards the main road. Shops were on her left, a small park on her right. She held her map up and frowned slightly, trying to make sense of it in relation to the landmarks and roads around her. It did make sense at last, and she strode off, trying to look confident. She was determined that she wasn't going to be intimidated by anyone. She knew that was the way to walk, confident, yet ready to get out of the way if anyone who was busy thinking, looking, or just walking in a dream. She looked down. Her black suit was suitably immaculately clean. Her blue blouse was neatly pressed, her handbag suitably smart, and containing all the things she deemed necessary for survival in the urban jungle. She took the brown envelope out of her bag and had it clasped in her hand. Inside was the research she had done, which had mostly ended up as more questions and the reason for her taking a day off and making the trip. She found the alleyway between the park and Gordon's wine bar. She stepped away from the main concourse and walked down the steps. The tables and chairs were set out for customers, but they were empty this early in the morning. Just past the wine bar, she turned left and stepped up into another road and checked the road signs. Buckingham Street. That was the one she wanted. She was nearly there. The row of buildings towered over her, uniformly white, intimidating and reassuringly old and elegant. She counted along the numbers and found the place she needed to be. She took a deep breath to steady herself, stepped up the white steps to the panel of bells and pressed one. She wanted, marked 19, stepped back and waited. She was answered by a click and a man's voice. "Good morning, can I help you?" She smiled and tried to get the smile reflected in her voice. "Rebecca Aven, to see David Wolfe." The buzzer sounded and she pushed the door as the disembodied voice spoke again. "Please take the lift and come down to the basement." She stepped into the entrance lobby and felt the deep pale carpet under her feet. There were post boxes on the right-hand side. All were empty. She passed them and was relieved as she could easily find the lift. It was a narrow door and with an up and down or down button. She pressed the down button and her action was answered by a swift, crisp ping sound, and the door grated slightly as it opened. The lift too was small, about enough space for 3 people if they got on, wood-panelled and fairly well maintained, though it was showing signs of age. She pressed LG, the doors closed, and down she went. Rebecca didn't have time to panic, as the doors opened almost immediately, and she was there, faced with the hallway, and a man in a blue pinstripe suit, white shirt and blue tie. His sandy-coloured hair was slightly ruffled, and looked as though he had been running his fingers through it. His sideburns were neatly trimmed. He was thin, and the suit hung slightly on him, though his shoulders were broad, and his smile seemed to brighten the hallway. He took a step forwards and offered her his hand. "You must be Rebecca. I am David Wolfe. Welcome." He smiled and she relaxed. He saw her relax and he relaxed as well. "I hate interviews, so I'm going to tell you this now. We've already sorted out the CVs, and I wouldn't have asked you if we weren't going to offer you a job. I'm assuming you wouldn't have come this far if you didn't want the job. We are recruiting a few people, and we have taken the liberty of looking into your credentials, history, and we have already assessed your aptitude for coping with the sort of situations that we may have to deal with, and we think there is a place for you in our organisation." She looked stunned, couldn't think what to say, so she shook her head, and she definitely wouldn't come if she didn't want the job. David smiled broadly. "Good. Well, that's got that out of the way. Impressive CV, by the way. Like the hobbies, and don't worry about a lack of experience. We don't know what you're going to face anyway. Right, now, come in here, sit down, and I'll tell you all about it, and you can decide if you would be totally mad to be involved in all this, or mad enough." He opened a white gloss wooden door with polished brass fittings and stepped inside so she could step into the room beyond. The room was immaculately tidy. A large leather-topped desk was in the centre of the room. It had a single chair behind it, and a single chair was positioned waiting for her. There was a single filing cabinet to her right, and a coat stand to her left. A small pile of files was stacked neatly on the right-hand side of the desk. David smiled, went to his seat, and turned to face her. "Please have a seat." She sat down and crossed her legs and tried to relax back into the chair. "I have the paperwork you asked for." David smiled. "Thank you. Now you will be asked to sign a confidentiality agreement. Can you keep a secret? Rebecca smiled but looked puzzled. Yes, of course. David sat down behind the desk and leant back, pulling his trouser knees up so he didn't mark his suit. Well? Oh, I'm sorry. Would you like a cup of coffee? I would. She was bemused as he jumped up again and looked at her hopefully. Yes, please, she responded, happy at the thought of something to occupy her hands, as she had no idea how to place them. She was feeling nervous still, and it was becoming a fixation with her that it was important to her how she placed her hands. He smiled. Oh, good. I could really do with one. We enjoy our coffee around here, so you've probably just passed the test. Whittard's is just around the corner. It has a good Colombian bean. Is that all right with you? He went out of the room. Rebecca looked around the room, and certain things struck her as wrong. There were marks on the deep pile carpet where office furniture had been, and there were marks of 2 desks on either side of the room. The window had curtain rails for curtains, but no curtains. There was no wastepaper basket, and there was no telephone. She reached forwards and looked at the files on the table and lifted a corner. The papers were blank inside the file. There was no dust. Those files had been there a very short amount of time. The pencils were all new. The biros all had their tops on them. There were no notes or writing anywhere on the paper of the files, and the files were too new, and not dog-eared at all. The room didn't smell right either. She couldn't put her finger on it, but the room was just wrong. There was a strong smell of old papers, and the mustiness that was being masked by an air freshener. Everything in the room was new. David came back, and Rebecca took the offered cup of coffee, although she now felt very nervous about it. She smiled and sat down. Well, what do you think? He smiled and sat down. Well, what do you think so far? Rebecca looked at him and put the coffee onto the safe non-wood part of the desk. Well, can I ask what is going on here, please? The office is obviously set up and the files don't look right. David smiled broadly. Oh, very good. Very discreet. I like the way you lifted the file to see inside without letting it move. Very good. You'll do well. I did tell you a slight untruth. You weren't certain of the job. You were certain of a job, but not the one we are going to offer you. We need someone who will be observant, learn quickly, and be able to adapt to situations. So I suppose I'd better come clean in the face of your deductive skills. Rebecca smiled. It was a test? Well, I don't understand how it is relevant to the job offered. David took a sip of his coffee. Well, you, my dear, are going to become a smallholder in Wales. Your job will be to prepare that smallholding for all computers on the planet to be turned off. You also have to get the smallholding to be able to support up to 35 people sustainably. It is a project we need to undertake to see whether it can be done. We are serious, and we want you to take it seriously as well. Rebecca nodded and smiled. Sounds interesting and certainly different. David smiled. You will have to resign from your current job and decide to be self-employed. From then on, you will sell things on eBay and do anything you can to keep that small holding going. All you have to do is live the life and learn like anyone else would. We will not meet you again, although you're indeed most charming. You will receive your salary by way of unexpected bonuses, sales on eBay, and the like. As far as you are concerned, the lights will go out at midnight. Not sure what date yet. You can tell people, but they won't believe you. Not after the millennia and 2012. Nemesis, however, is real. He is logical, and he is about to implement what is the only possible solution for the survival of mankind and the planet. I believe you are one of the few people who have chatted to him, and he was rather amused by being called a pet that didn't need walking. He now has access to every computer on the planet. You know that Jack had a high-powered job with the voting show. That gave Nemesis the access he needed. If you are agreeable, we'll make all the arrangements, and you can move to the small holding as soon as you like. You will be initially working with Charles Rowland. We have arranged the paperwork that you will appear legally as a married couple, although all paperwork will be in your name." She left the office in a dream. The paperwork did indeed arrive in the form of a contract to sign, and the small holding was hers. Everything was organised for her, and when she arrived, the equipment was in place. She jumped in her car. Oberon, her dog, jumped in beside her, and her German Shepherd jumped inside her, and she drove off to Wales. She met Charles Roman there. He was an attractive man, a little arrogant, and he was also a little bemused at being married. It was Charles who noticed Crow and Raven in their names. Those were the names they took on. 10 years had passed since that day, but on that day at midnight, what had been promised happened.